Hello, everyone. I'm Kathleen Slonager, and I'm here to talk about asthma and allergies and what halotherapy has to offer. And I just want to say thank you to World Halotherapy Association and all the sponsors and all of you for participating in this great worldwide event. And I'm excited to offer my perspective and hope that it provides some great information for you. So let's get started. So just to show some of my disclosures, I am a consultant for Halotherapy Solutions and the World Halotherapy Association. I'm also the executive director of the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America, the Michigan chapter. We're part of a national collaboration. And I'm also a homeopathic practitioner and owner of Transformational Health. So here are some of my other collaborative memberships and board memberships. So I like to really keep my mind open and my hands in a lot of different modalities and organizations. It keeps me young, I guess. So also just a reminder that we're going to talk a lot about issues in medicine and medical issues today. And it's for educational purposes what we're discussing. So of course you should always talk with your healthcare provider. So let's talk about asthma and the impact that asthma can have. We know that asthma is consistently in the top 5 most costly health conditions, and this is worldwide. In America, it affects about 70 million Americans. And worldwide, that number replicates. We know that in the US, there are 14 million outpatient visits and 2 million emergency department visits, with almost 500,000 hospital visits. And a lot of those are because of uncontrolled asthma. 15 million people are affected by food allergies, and that does seem to be a more industrial country problem. And the annual cost of asthma in this country, in the US, is $82 billion. And again, a lot of that is due to out of control asthma, and that includes direct and indirect costs. And there's a lot of factors that affect why this is going on. You have patient behavior and environmental factors, such as smoking and indoor and outdoor air pollution and pests. And unfortunately, there's an increase in the prevalence rates of asthma that started back in the 80s and has continued to grow worldwide, especially for the younger than 12 group. Now, here's some of the asthma prevalence that I could find for worldwide numbers, and this was from 2017. So you can see it's some of the most industrialized nations in the world that have more asthma prevalence. In America, I think this actually is a little bit higher now. But you can see Australia is, the #1 place with asthma prevalence. So that's an interesting kind of fact to note. So worldwide, it affects over 262 million people and caused almost 500,000 deaths worldwide. And most asthma-related deaths occur in low and lower middle-class income countries, where underdiagnosis and undertreatment is a challenge. And this goes along with a lot of what we're learning more about healthcare disparities. Countries with the highest prevalence of asthma were Australia, Sweden, the United Kingdom, Netherlands, Brazil. And the lowest rates were observed in Vietnam, and Bosnia, and China. And we estimate that the higher prevalence observed in more developed countries may be due to increased urbanization and westernized lifestyle and higher rates of obesity and pollution. So again, asthma is a multifactorial problem. And again, it impacts in disproportionate ways to racial and ethnic differences as well as economic. So there's differences in the frequency illness and death are concerned. with poverty, air quality, allergens, education, and access to quality health care, which includes holistic modalities. So asthma, what is it? It is a chronic inflammatory disease of the airway. Inflammation is the biggest issue with asthma, causing airway obstruction, airway inflammation, increased airway hyperresponsiveness, and actually airway remodeling, meaning that scar tissue can form. And there's kind of a graphic of a normal lung. You can see here it's open, the airway is nice and clear, the muscle bands are nice and loose, air can come in and get exchanged in and out. But you can see with the person with asthma or other chronic inflammatory respiratory problems, there's a lot of swelling. These muscle bands are tightening up, causing constriction. More mucus is getting formed, and that airway for air exchange is very small, as you can see. So allergies are also part of this whole picture. And think of asthma and allergies as being an autoimmune condition, and we're going to talk a lot more about autoimmune issues. But allergies are a sister to asthma, and it's actually worldwide the most common chronic disease. It occurs when the body's immune system sees a substance as harmful and overreacts to it. And then the immune system makes an antibody called IgE, and that's what sends the whole cascade of allergy problems. The sneezing, the coughing, the itching, the skin rashes. Now, asthma and allergies, again, they're an autoimmune disease. And if you look at autoimmune diagnoses, there's a lot of them. Things like lupus and diabetes and celiac and psoriasis, rheumatoid arthritis, thyroid issues, alopecia, and you can see the list goes on and on and on. And this is actually a picture of autoimmune cells in the blood that show that there is actually a problem happening. Here's a nice slide because it really goes into that, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These are all the different autoimmune diseases. And remember, asthma and allergies are part of this. So in the brain, things like multiple sclerosis and autism, the skin, the psoriasis and vitiligo, other kinds of respiratory illnesses. The nervous system can be affected with different neuropathies, and definitely the GI tract with celiac and Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. I mean, the list kind of is endless, isn't it? There's over 100 different types of autoimmune disorders. And so as we're talking about asthma and allergies today, you can extrapolate and think about those other autoimmune issues. So what triggers this response, this autoimmune response? And I have a feeling my camera is covering up the picture of the lady sneezing. Here's what triggers. It's different for everybody. So you can have some people be allergic to something they're eating or drinking. But I always like people to consider this. Everything we eat, drink, touch, smell, and inject has a potential to be an allergen. So it could be an irritant, an actual allergen, it could be an infection or a microbe, and it could be an environmental toxicant, like pollution or other chemicals in the environment, right? And there are lots and lots of symptoms that go along with an autoimmune response or an allergic response. And some of these that we're going to go over are less typically known or associated with an autoimmune reaction. But these are symptoms that show a weakened immune system. Things like abdominal cramps and gas and bloating and diarrhea or constipation. Acid reflux, which is known as GERD, and IBS. joint pain, muscle aches, fibromyalgia, fatigue. Goodness gracious, I don't know how many of you have your clients talking about these issues, but here they are, right? A majority of folks are experiencing these kinds of symptoms. Other symptoms include, of course, the skin issues we talked about, eczema and psoriasis, uncontrolled fatigue after eating, brain fog, ADD or ADHD-like symptoms, headaches and irregular heartbeats, and frequent colds, flus, and infection. Again, typically most people in the world, when they are suffering, they're going to have something like this. So we need to consider autoimmunity. Something I also like to point out is that unfortunately, our children are experiencing these kinds of symptoms in numbers that have never been seen before. It's said from studies that the generation growing up now will actually not outlive their parents due to chronic illness. Never before in the history of mankind has that happened, where the children will not outlive the parents because of chronic illness. And you can see that this is just a little snapshot of some of the issues that kids are suffering with. Autism is more like 1 in 50 in industrialized places in the world. Epilepsy and seizure, 33% of children coming down with those issues. Developmental disability, 1 in 6. Diabetes, 1 in 10 for asthma. The #1 leading cause of death in children is cancer. And that just shouldn't be happening. And again, this list goes on and on and on. Now, shockingly, 54% of children have some kind of chronic disease. And this number is for this country. I couldn't find numbers for worldwide. I don't think it's data that's tracked yet. 54%. Some children have 1 or more chronic illness. And it's on the rise. Again, why? We need to be asking why? And we need to get to the root of these issues. And the why is basically everything we eat, drink, touch, smell, and inject is affecting our health and the health of our children. Now, again, autoimmune illness is on the rise, especially in developed world and in women. And there are numerous environmental influences. And of course, the scientists aren't clear on what those are, but in the alternative and complementary medicine world, we're pretty clear on what they are. Everything we eat, drink, touch, smell, and inject. So here's how we're going to take this now. We talked about asthma and allergies being autoimmune illness. We brought up all those other autoimmune issues. Now keep in mind, autoimmune illness starts with inflammation somewhere in the body. Immune system dysfunction begins with the inflammatory process. So what we need to do as healthcare providers, as people concerned about other people's health and wellness, we need to help that body move from being in inflammatory responses. And a lot of that has to do with shifting the body from acidic to more alkaline. And once we can do that, that helps the inflammation go down. Now, I'm sure this is a smart group of people, and I'm sure you know what the #1 driver of inflammation is. I wish I had a little poll going on right now. But the #1 driver of inflammation is stress. And that stress can be, something like, what we typically identify as stress, being in an argument. But stress is also not having enough food to eat, or having to go outside and breathe in all the pollution. It goes on and on and on, what the body identifies as stress. A recent poll was done by the American Psychiatric Association, and people were feeling that the #1 stress in their life at that time was the future of our nation. And that was a 63% positive impact. And then, of course, followed by money, work, political climate, and violence and crime. So you can see there's a lot of things that cause the body to be in stress, which leads to inflammation, which leads to over-acidic. Now here's a great chart to show how inflammation affects the body. And remember, we went all the way from a chronic disease like asthma and allergies to this issue of inflammation, because inflammation is where it all starts. It is the root of practically all known chronic health conditions, according to Dr. Jockers. Right? So in the brain, you have these cytokines that cause that autoimmune reaction, and that can lead to depression, poor memory, Alzheimer's, MS, other kinds of dementia. The heart, inflammation in the heart and in the venous and arterial walls contributes to heart disease, strokes, and high blood sugar, leading to diabetes and anemia. I mean, I can go on and on and on to continue talking about how inflammation affects the body. And I think that one of the besides respiratory problems, I think the other big one that we practitioners see often is thyroid problems. And we can see that autoimmunity is a result of inflammation, and that reduces the total thyroid receptor count and disrupts thyroid function. So again, if we want to help people heal and feel better, how do we get this inflammation? How do we control this inflammation and reverse that trend? Look at this. Probably using halotherapy would help, right? So halotherapy, we know. I'm talking to the choir here, right? We know halotherapy is natural and safe, and there's no serious side effects. We know that it's beneficial for overall wellness by improving function and removing toxic substances from the respiratory system and the body in general. We know that it improves the function and appearance of the skin. We know halotherapy boosts the immune system and reduces stress. And halotherapy leads to normalized pH, which is that alkaline versus acidic. But again, probably the most important thing to remember is that halotherapy is anti-inflammatory. And it triggers anti-inflammatory work in the body, and it is also anti-allergic. We know a lot of the studies have been done on bronchial asthma and bronchitis, but we can extrapolate this information to other organ systems in the body. Halotherapy's anti-inflammatory mechanism is also including the mucolytic and antibacterial, again, anti-inflammatory, immunomodulating, which means it can help with the immune system, and hyposensitizing. So remember in the beginning, we talked about asthma and allergies being a hyper response of the immune system. So halotherapy can help bring that down. We know that lowering the inflammatory response means healthier immune system and less chronic illness. So when you go to hopefully now you're more excited about installing halotherapy systems in your particular business. But when you go to market it, you have a host of science-based information to help people understand that in order to fix something like asthma or allergies, which is a horrible chronic disease, you've got to bring the inflammation down. So talking about anti-inflammatory properties for chronic disease is of utmost importance as you're getting out there with your halotherapy. Now, we know that COVID has been a horrible problem worldwide. And I want to help you understand that, yes, halotherapy can help people during a COVID exacerbation, but also those long haulers for those post-COVID symptoms that are so prevalent and becoming a big problem. But before we kind of go any further, I want to caution you not to market your halotherapy or halotherapy in general as a COVID treatment. The regulatory agencies are monitoring all kinds of communication. And if you say you have a treatment for COVID, they're going to be knocking on your door. And we don't need that. But what we can say is that we have a treatment that helps with respiratory issues, that helps with inflammation, that helps with the brain fog, right? And these are all things that we have science to back up. And even when I'm talking to people about COVID, I don't usually use that term or that diagnosis, and I say things like recent worldwide illness, recent troubles with cough and fatigue. So I want to help people, but I also don't want any regulatory agencies knocking on my door. So we know COVID can help, and it should be an option for treatment and those suffering long haulers issues. And many studies have been done on COVID, which we know that COVID triggers chronic respiratory diseases. And this particular study done in December 2020, the authors are surmising that halotherapy can be useful, in the treatment of chronic respiratory disease. So this is a good study to highlight in any of your literature. WebMD is also highlighting that halotherapy can be used to treat breathing problems caused by COVID-19 and improve breathing and the amount of oxygen in the blood. So again, this is plain to read on WebMD, and that's a great resource to be able to highlight. This happens to be a halotherapy infrared combo unit. And according to Erin Lee, whom I'm sure you've all met in some fashion by now, she's the World Halotherapy Association Executive Director. She's highlighting that recent studies show that halotherapy treatments benefit individuals exposed to COVID-19 and help to recover from damaged lungs and other problems, such as fatigue and weakness. Halotherapy can also help in promoting overall well-being and reduce emotional and physical stress post-COVID-19. And again, remember, if you reduce stress, you're reducing inflammation. In this article that Erin she pointed out that the UNESCO World Heritage Site in Poland states that patients who tried salt therapy after being exposed to COVID-19 are seeing positive results in breathing and overall physical health. So those are some of the original salt caves in Poland that they're utilizing. So I wanted to point out also some of the wonderful synergistic benefits of halotherapy and something like homeopathy, which I am a certified homeopath, so I like to point out the similarities because they're both ancient kinds of medicine. So just to highlight a little bit about homeopathy, I wanted to let you know what homeopathy is. And it's a system of medicine that's based on the law of similars. And it's been used well over 240 years worldwide. And its primary principle is likes cure likes. So our medicines are made from substances that produce similar symptoms in healthy people. And so when that happens and we know a sick person comes in with those similar symptoms, that's the medicine we would use. And homeopathic medicine actually works by stimulating the body's own immune system, their own vital force to respond. And that's very similar to what halotherapy does, right? The halotherapy isn't the cure. The halotherapy is motivating the body to change and cure itself. Homeopathy is research informed and evidence-based. There are thousands of solid studies, and we use very small doses, microdoses of substances in our medicines. That's what also sets homeopathy apart from other kinds of medicine, is the way they're made. Microdoses of the substances. Some people are even referring to it now as nanomedicine. Now, in homeopathy, we have thousands and thousands and thousands of remedies or homeopathic medicines. One of our biggest remedies that has been around the longest and is used so many times, it's actually called a polycrest because it's so large, is called NATRUM muriaticum, which guess what? Is salt. Now remember how homeopathic medicines are made. We're not just shaking out some salt on somebody's tongue. Their homeopathic medicines are made in a very dilute state. Dilutions are so large, for example, that there's no more molecules left of the original substance, and we believe that it carries it into the energy of that substance. But again, one of the oldest ones that we've used is natrum mure, which is salt. And I've picked up some of the symptoms that come for natrum mure, and you're going to see they're very similar to some of those things that we've been talking about in the inflammatory process and the autoimmune issues. So nat mure is really great when there's sinus problems, when there's problems with burning in the eyes and lots of tearing, when there's lots of what's called coryza, which is congestion, so much so that it just stops the nose up and you can't breathe. The discharge is usually thin and watery. Some of the other symptoms in the nat mure picture, lots of respiratory. So we have lots of cough, especially the tickling from the pit of the stomach, cough with bursting pain in the head, shortness of breath, a lot of skin issues, the eruptions, urticaria, which is like kind of like hives, the itching and the burning, eruptions, eczema. Again, remember, these are all things that we've been talking about in the immune and inflammatory processes, right? So in summary, yes, halotherapy can help. We need to include integrative approaches as adjunctive care in managing autoimmune disorders like asthma and allergies. This is a huge opportunity for holistic practitioners of all kinds, for spas and for centers to include halotherapy in their regime of healing modalities. Because it's a win-win for everybody, right? Remember in the beginning, using halotherapy is an opportunity to help decrease that $82 billion cost of asthma and allergies just in this country alone. And more importantly, it improves the health of so many, especially children. So think of all those inflammatory issues and all those autoimmune issues that using something as simple and basic as a halotherapy treatment can benefit. And so as you're marketing the benefits of halotherapy to the world around you, please be sure to include the issues around chronic inflammation and autoimmune issues. I think a lot of people will respond. So I've left some of my sources here. Everything I've talked about is backed up by data of some kind. If you want a copy of this slide set for some reason, just please send an email to Erin at World Halotherapy Association, and I'd be happy to forward it. And here's my contact information. Feel free to contact me anytime if you have questions about how halotherapy can help autoimmune issues, especially asthma and allergies. Or if you have any questions on homeopathy, I'm happy to help. And my suite number is LL1, if my picture happens to be blocking that. But your best bet's to shoot an email. I'm always happy to respond that way. So thank you very much. I hope this has been a benefit for you and that it triggers a little excitement about halotherapy and autoimmune issues. And let's go help the world be better. Thank you so much.